Today, I would like to talk about 10 red flags of a female narcissist. Before I begin, I have to add two important disclaimers up front, though. First of all, I have not been in a relationship with a female narcissist, so I don't know exactly what this is like, except from the anecdotes I had been told by others and relationships I have observed from the outside in. My experiences with female narcissists mostly involved former friends, coworkers, or family members. So today's podcast includes a lot of personal observations and experiences I had with female narcissists in my private and professional life as well. And if you find that anything needs to be added to the list, I would very much appreciate if you mention it in the comments section below, so others can find that information and learn from it. Thank you very much for that in advance. Secondly, please check the description in all of my podcasts and videos, because I make it very clear that narcissists are not only men, and that women aren't the sole victims of them. I make it very clear that narcissistic abuse does not discriminate. So whenever I get a comment from someone saying something along the lines of me wanting to make men look bad, that's obviously not the case. I try to be as neutral in my language as possible. Sometimes I use he when I talk about my own experience being a female having dealt with a male malignant narcissist. And other times, it just sounds very odd to my ears to use a they plural when I use the narcissist singular, given also that English is my second language. That's why I try to use the plural as much as possible, but it's not always possible. I wanted to get this out of the way because I'm very well aware that narcissistic abuse can affect everybody on this planet. And this podcast today is certainly a sign of that. I think what male and female narcissists definitely have in common is that they are control freaks, with the same control issues and insecurities that come with it. One of the earliest signs of female narcissism is how they used to behave in their childhoods, and that usually starts as early as elementary school. They were most likely the leader of a girl gang, or bullied the other girls that did not qualify to join them. Looking back at my own time in school, I found that narcissism, entitlement, and a lack of empathy tended to show earlier in the girls more than it did in the boys, long before puberty. They were more overtly aggressive in the first few years, and somewhere later along their timelines, the males became more overt while the females shifted to be more covert and manipulative. Again, that was my personal observation. So the first red flag you will notice is that female narcissists are very attention-seeking. Remember that cluster B personality disorders can overlap and appear in comorbidity with another. You will find that female narcissists, and I'm speaking of grown adults now, will be leaning more toward histrionic or borderline personality disorder, while male narcissists often lean more toward antisocial personality disorder, which is when we speak of the malignant narcissist. This doesn't exclude women, but you will often find the traits spread out this way. Female narcissists love being the center of attention everywhere they go. They often entertain the entire office or table with their anecdotes, and everybody needs to listen. Unfortunately, many seem to fall for that charade and are impressed by her self-confidence in the way she delivers her story because it's completely blown out of proportion and presented in a way that makes her seem larger than life. It's like every time she makes just one step out of the door, she comes back with a major story to tell. You will notice that a dynamic conversation is not possible with them in a group setting, where you would typically interject each other. Also notice how they are checking everybody out while they are talking. They can literally tell if you are not listening and put you on their imaginary hit list. You gotta be careful, cause the people around you in that moment will become her flying monkeys. The same flying monkeys and enablers who will also tell her how great she looks when she's fishing for compliments with self-deprecating language, telling everybody how fat and ugly she feels today. And if a female narcissist has children, she loves sharing anecdotes of her children. You will find a lot of them among mommy bloggers, for instance. But it's not like they are good parents and available 24/7. They are just focusing on the parts that give them the most attention and validation. They use their children's personal achievements and make them their own. Or if they ever do mention any trouble, then they assure the victim and have it the most difficult. But they don't actually seek a solution because they are completely immune to any advice. Nobody can tell them how to raise their children. They look for attention, sympathy, or pity in these moments. Rest assured that they are also the contributors to their own problems. because a lot of children are merely seen as an extension of their narcissistic parent and are put under an enormous pressure to perform and always make the narcissist look good. And they will continue with the same show on social media. They will brag with their family pictures, purchases, or post the same selfie over and over again to get hundreds of likes and comments because they tend to have a lot of Facebook friends. They're also most likely the ones who will post about all of their good deeds they do in their community. Speaking of the communal narcissist here, for them, it's all about impression management. Another thing they do when it comes to seeking attention is that they always want something new. This usually applies when you live together with a female narcissist in a relationship or in a marriage. They either move or want to renovate the house a lot to always have something new to show off with when they have guests over, or to impress the neighbors, because they are in competition with them too. They also watch and mirror their neighbors. If the neighbor builds a new white picket fence, guess what the female narcissist wants her husband to do? If the neighbor has a new car, guess what she wants? It's not just mentally and physically draining to always keep up with the Joneses, but most of all financially exhausting. They can't just for once enjoy what they have. And speaking of having guests, female narcissists come notoriously too late to a party to make sure they will have all eyes on them when they arrive. It's disrespectful to the host, really. I remember how my mother told our aunt to arrive 1 hour earlier to our birthday party once, and she got mad because she was the first to arrive. They don't care if they waste your time. They are the kind of people who go to a department store and harass the cashier with a million questions about their discounted 100% cotton, plain black, and boring t-shirt. They simply love how all eyes are on them while the line behind them gets longer and longer, and act like they are all about the quality of the fabric, while in fact they may just want to bargain for another discount. Doesn't matter if the other customers start hating on her and want her to leave. And it also doesn't matter to her how awkward the situation is altogether and how uncomfortable the cashier feels in that moment. And speaking of clothing, another thing they do to grab people's attention is that they will modify and customize everything. They don't just accept things as they are. They have to put their personal stamp on it and make things look unique to them to stand out from the crowd. For instance, they don't just wear plain blue jeans as most of us, but have to add some strange pattern to it or some accessory. They love wearing or attaching accessories to almost everything. That includes their bodies. They like changing things up often, especially when it comes to their hair, because it's an attention grabber. They indulge in those compliments. Or they wear shirts that are at least one size too small. Which leads me to point number 2. Female narcissists use sexual manipulation and provocation. They like wearing provoking outfits with a low neckline. So it's difficult for some people to focus and keep their eyes up. They are so vain, they always have to spend a lot of time in the bathroom before they leave their home. They know that men tend to be more visually attracted, and they love to play with their charm, sexuality, and attractiveness, and will position themselves in a way to get noticed without saying a single word. And they have absolutely no boundaries and zero qualms when it comes to that. Even if the person they are approaching is married or in a stable relationship. They don't care if they are homewreckers. For them, it's all about winning. And because they are so manipulative, they are also very sensitive to the signs of a broken man. When there's trouble in his relationship or marriage, they see an opportunity to get their hooks in. And one of the red flags you'll notice is when they keep randomly using a man's name in your conversation. They feel closer to them than they actually are. If you hear a female use someone's name a lot, they are not just attracted to the person, but also most likely on a mission. But here's the funny thing. They can't read the room. They don't realize when their awkward attempt to seduce somebody makes their target highly uncomfortable, or even the people around them. Especially when it happens at the workplace where it's deemed out of line and unprofessional. Ironically, that's actually the best thing that can happen. Because that way the female narcissist ostracizes herself and won't be enabled by her environment, which they will slowly notice over time. Sometimes they simply do too much, and their imposing behavior turns out to be a huge turn-off for many. Unfortunately, that's when they can also become very dangerous. They can't deal with rejection. For example, a lot of female narcissists have abused and taken the Me Too movement to their advantage. If a man doesn't respond the way she wants him to respond, they may become very hostile and come up with a story to ruin his reputation. And it's very sad, because true victims men or women alike, who are supposed to benefit from the Me Too movement like I did, they won't be believed anymore and won't receive the help they need. In my case, Me Too literally saved my life back in 2018 because it provided me with the courage to speak my truth, validation, and a support system in form of free counseling. Female narcissists like flirting a lot in general, even if they have no intentions to take it any further than that. It gives them instant gratification, which reminds me of a female narcissist in my life who always had to do a double take on men, as I would describe it. This story actually took a very surprising turn. So this woman thought she would always have to give special thanks and gratitude to whomever she would always refer to as, quote unquote, the boys, in situations nobody would ever deem it necessary, not even the men themselves. And I knew exactly whenever she said the boys, it always meant she meant some sort of an affection going on for at least one of them. She just wouldn't say it directly. So one day I was on my way to work and my windshield got hit by a rock on the freeway. I told this female narcissist, who was my friend at the time, about the accident, and she immediately recommended a garage to me that she had gone to not too long ago. She then added that she still had to bring some donuts to the boys for their service. That side note in itself sounded pretty odd to me. I mean, any other customer would just pay the bill and leave. Maybe they would give them a review on the internet, but that's about it. And I guess the boys at the garage wouldn't expect anything more than that either. Anyways, I gave them a call and told them that they were being recommended to me. The man on the phone asked me where the recommendation came from, and I started to describe my friend to him. He immediately interrupted me and finished my description, which showed me that she must have left a lasting impression. He knew right away who I was talking about and ended his sentence with a brief pause, followed by calling her a bitch. I guess that told me what she was after. Meanwhile, her partner was back in the old province she moved away from for a job, unaware of what was going on 3,000 miles away from him. To this day, I believe her goal was to attract as many Canadian men as possible to secure her immigration status, because that's how she messed up a lot of relationships with our male co-workers the first time I had met her. And that also leads me to my next point: entitlement and exploitation. I had known this woman from my first time in Canada. We both happened to be from Germany. She and I worked at the same Canadian company, and we were friends when we used to live in a different province together. The fact that she followed me to the other province was maybe just one of the many red flags I should have noticed. But this was long before I even knew what narcissism was. She and I hadn't talked to each other for over a year or two, because I had left Canada and returned to a whole different city over a year later. Then I decided to move to a whole different province after another year. And when she eventually decided to move across the country, she would suddenly reappear. Because that's what narcissists do. They hoover you. Suddenly you are on their radar again, no matter how much time has passed. Not only that, while I had already moved on from that friendship a long time ago, she would make this wild suggestion to find an apartment with me and move in together, like I had no private life at all. I wondered what made me interesting again. And then she actually exposed herself one day. I asked her if she had the intention to apply for Canadian citizenship. Mind you, back then the law in Germany was different. You weren't allowed to obtain dual citizenship unless you could lay out proof as to why you would like to obtain the other and keep the German one as well. She told me that it was very difficult for her to become a dual citizen because the only tie she had left in Germany was an estranged uncle of hers. Their relationship wasn't the best. But then she said that once the time has come, this relationship has to be well taken care of. And I immediately realized this was exactly what she was doing with me right then and there, as we were hanging out together. She was taking advantage of me, because I was the only one she knew in this province, and once again, we hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Female narcissists are very calculating that way. They feel entitled to your time and resources whenever they please. Which leads me to another example. I once worked with a female narcissist who even got in trouble with immigration because she felt entitled to simply show up in a foreign country and just do her own thing. Rules and laws simply don't apply to them, and that same woman turned out to be a con artist. She even asked me if she could have my car for free and keep the insurance running for me should I decide to leave Canada again and come back one day. But here's the thing. The person whose name is on the insurance papers in Canada also becomes the owner of the car. What do you think would have happened? My guess is, given the fact that she wanted to become a movie producer and was basically an illegal immigrant, she would have sold the car and pocketed the money if she hadn't totaled it in an accident already by then. Anyways, that's not how we had met. Before I'd known all of this about her, I offered my availability to help on an independent short film she was producing, as I was just building my experience. The project was scheduled for 2 days, but as I was sitting in the production meeting, she suddenly needed us for 4 days, maybe even 6. Who knows? She basically asked for 3 times the investment out of a sudden, and for free. But that is exactly what they do. They lure you in under false pretense and in the hope that you won't say no. They will catch you like a fly in a spider's web, so to speak, and turn into opportunists while you're there, especially when you're just starting out. They get into relationships or friendships for materialistic, social, or financial gain, not camaraderie. They constantly think, what's in it for me? While striving for a lifestyle that they can't create for themselves, and therefore look for others who will. And strangely, they have very high standards and expectations for the other person, while they have not much to offer themselves. That way, they're quite similar to the entitled male narcissist. They expect perfection and special treatment, but when they do something, it's usually good enough. They also complain a lot. For instance, at a restaurant. They say the food was bad and treat the service personnel like a slave. It truly makes them feel powerful to be served. Maybe they'll also do it to get away with paying the bill or get a discount or to not have to tip the waiter. They can be very cheap that way. That's why they seek out men with money and status. But it often backfires when the husband wakes up to it and wants a divorce. And then, quite often, they use their children as a tool to blackmail and tell him he'll never see his children again if he doesn't do X, Y, and Z to comply with their demands. Children are nothing but a tool for the female narcissist, as I said before. They need them for power, control, and attention. Next, the female narcissist is highly competitive in every aspect of life. They are even in competition with their own daughters and like to mirror them by dressing or acting as young as they are. They are simply afraid to get older and lose their attractiveness. Sometimes you will have people point out to them that they thought they were sisters and not mother and daughter. It can be really awkward, especially if a narcissistic mother starts flirting with her daughter's boyfriend, or worse, starts an affair with him. They have absolutely no boundaries to make themselves feel good. And as I said before, they like being in competition with their neighbors. Not only that, they are in competition with their own family members too, and always bring up the same old stories of how their siblings wronged them at some point in their life, maybe when they were kids. They tend to dwell on the past because they are not willing to address their own trauma. They will usually bring up these old stories at family events, such as a birthday party, to remind everybody that they are the victim. I have seen this happening so many times within my own family, even at a funeral once. And over time you will notice how nobody will come visiting anymore. Female narcissists are also highly competitive at the workplace, especially when the majority are male co-workers at the company. She sees other women as someone who invades her territory, so to speak, or as I tend to call it, her playground. They will act supportive in your new endeavors to get you out of the way, or find reasons not to go for a promotion because it comes with more responsibility, or maybe you have to move to a new city, and that should scare you off. Or simply for the fact because they feel more entitled to a promotion than you, because they are older or have seniority over you. And because you're so much younger, they simply justify it with the fact that you still have all the time in the world and more chances than they have. Which leads me to my next point. They like to patronize other people and dish out unsolicited advice, but they can never take it themselves, let alone listen to their own advice. They want to act like a mentor or a parental figure to control or sabotage your development, and that way keep you small. Which leads me to another experience I had with the female narcissist who suddenly reappeared in my life in the other province. One day we hung out together again, and I was telling her about my plans to do a road trip to Los Angeles and attend an acting class, which had been a dream of mine since I was very young. She could sense that I was very determined about that. I'm the kind of person who's not just talking about things, but I actually do them because I have them planned out 10 times in advance, knowing full well if and how I can accomplish my goal. So when I told her about my plan, she immediately got triggered and patronized me like I was a stupid teenager on the run who hadn't thought it through. And how do you want to afford it? You won't just pay for the school. You're also driving down and pay for gas. You'll probably have to make a couple of stops on the way and pay for a motel. And then you need to stay in Los Angeles and also pay for food. And she went on and on and on, like she was my mother or something. They want to put doubt in your head and make you feel insecure about your decisions. They simply envy your opportunities and success in life. Maybe because you're further ahead of them in a certain aspect or have more money. But they will tell you that everybody envies them. Point number 6. And this goes hand in hand with their attention seeking. Instead of patronizing and acting like a know-it-all, they may play dumb or helpless, like they can't do anything on their own. They won't act like the damsel in distress in front of everyone, though. But when they do, they feign ignorance to avoid responsibility or to take advantage of someone. It's usually to give a man the opportunity to play the knight in shining armor. Once again, they are trying to lure a fly into their spider's web. Female narcissists probably think it's cute, but it's much more of an annoyance when you notice their pattern. They also like to play stupid in front of those who are your best friends or besties at work, to seduce and ruin your relationship with them. Sometimes they have a secret crush on them and get jealous of your friendship. I actually had this happening before with a very insecure woman, which leads me to my next point. They love to triangulate people, very much like the male narcissist, but the difference is that the male narcissist's primary intention is to diminish your self-worth and make you feel insecure and jealous, while female narcissists like to sabotage and break up your relationship with others. At least that's been my personal observation so far, especially with regard to friendships or work relationships. It's the female narcissist who's jealous in that case and not trying to make you the jealous one. You can literally feel the daggers coming out of their eyes when you have a lively conversation with their love interest, even when it's completely innocent or only professional. I had a male coworker, for instance, whom I'd been working with for many years. He's happily married with children, and to me he was just always like a big brother, nothing more. He also knew about my experience with a malignant narcissist in our industry and was very protective of me. But one day we got a new female in our crew, and she must have misunderstood his casual and nice attitude for something else, while he was just being friendly and professional. What I found concerning was her death stare toward me whenever I had a conversation with him. I could literally feel it, even if she was far away in the other corner of the room. It was scary. And she always needed to steal his attention somehow. That's one of those things you will notice, especially as an empath. It's not just triangulation, but the energy they fill the room with and the daggers coming out of their eyes. One thing you may want to avoid is to work for a married couple, because it will always create conflict and insecurity. I once had a job interview for a movie with a married directing couple and first talked to the wife. When they told me that the husband was from Switzerland, I noticed the energy shifting in the room and his wife changing out of a sudden when I talked to him about that. She was probably afraid that as Europeans from neighboring countries, we would somehow connect on that level. Let me tell you, it was extremely awkward. I knew right then and there that I wouldn't get the job. And without wanting to go off topic, the same can happen to men, by the way. One day on the set of Rocky IV, Sylvester Stallone pulled Dolph Lundgren aside and threatened him to keep his hands off his partner, who was Brigitte Nielsen at the time, because they are both Scandinavian, and Lundgren was much younger and better looking, of course. As somebody who was just starting out in Hollywood, it left him confused and intimidated to find himself confronted with Stallone's insecurities. So yeah, I could very much relate to that from a female perspective now. Another thing female narcissists will do is that they will badmouth people behind their backs before you've even had the chance to form your own opinion. It's a preemptive move to keep their environment under control. That woman who followed me to the other province did exactly that. It was only long after I had learned about narcissistic abuse that she had been triangulating the whole workplace against her long-term partner, who would arrive in Canada a few months later than her. I remember how confused he was when everybody seemed to have turned against him. He wasn't even given a single chance to make new friends. I strongly believed she needed to get rid of him because she was trying to find a Canadian to secure her permanent residence. She literally hinted at that and created enough of a smear campaign to make it work. They soon broke up after many years together. There was simply nothing more to get out of him. And according to her, he was a loser anyways because she used to make way more money than him. That's another thing they do. They compare their income to make themselves look better. Would a normal person talk like that? I don't think so. Let alone someone who's supposed to love you. And talking about breaking up, female narcissists will most likely insist that they broke things off because they can't handle the rejection and humiliation. Many of them literally hate men. It's like they want women to gang up on them or discriminate them in other ways. So yeah, with that in mind, my next point has to do with affairs. Just like male narcissists, female narcissists are prone to having affairs. But unlike the male narcissist, it's usually with people close to them or close to you. Rarely ever new people or strangers. They prefer familiarity, which makes them feel safe, and have most likely already flirted or seduced the other person enough to follow through with an affair. They tend to have affairs with coworkers or their partner's friends or his own coworkers even. They also don't shy away from stealing their best friend's partners. Or like I said before, worst case scenario, they start an affair with their daughter's boyfriend. They are very jealous when you get into a relationship while they are stuck in an unhappy one, or they are single. Keep in mind that narcissists are never happy and always want what you have. And when they get caught, they will always play the victim. Which is my next point. Female narcissists are histrionic drama queens. And they also have this strange tendency to always put themselves on a pedestal while playing the victim. If they lose a job, it's not because they have messed up or tried to seduce the manager. No, it's unfair. Because they were the ones who've worked the hardest, while everybody else was just lazy. They cannot admit fault or take accountability. And instead of apologizing, they may say, "I just meant well," or flip it completely around and call you ungrateful. Their problems are always more severe than yours, and their life is so much more complicated. They may write a lengthy post on social media just to have their flying monkeys validate them and enable their victim status without knowing all the details. Meanwhile, other people's problems will be dismissed by sheerly ignoring, one-upping, or talking over them. And quite often, they also use their terrible childhood as a means to make you feel bad. They compare themselves to you saying, "Well, I didn't have that growing up," which is ridiculous, because how can they hold your childhood against you? They are still envious if you had it easier than them. We are all brandmarked by our past in one way or another, and that is so invalidating. But again, they always got it worse. Another thing female narcissists tend to do, they like to play the "only because I'm a woman" card on men. They use their gender to their advantage. They are the type of women who distort feminism and take it to a whole different level. Female narcissists are not feminists. They don't care about the female collective because, once again, they are highly competitive toward people like them. And ganging up on men isn't what feminism is about either. It's about equality for men and women alike. They tend to distort and pervert things that started out with good intentions, like feminism or the Me Too movement I mentioned before. Truth be told, if they weren't focusing so much on controlling and manipulating everyone around them and simply minded their own business, they would have halved the troubles in their lives. Which leads me to my last point. They have an inflated ego, take things way too personally, are reactive with a tendency to snap, play the victim, use passive-aggressive language, and backhanded compliments. It's no surprise to me that narcissistic women are often described as catty. And speaking of catty, another thing I noticed, and I hope I'm not offending anyone when I say this, because before I'm making such bold statements based on personal observation, I always double-check the internet, whether my observations have any substance at all. And I found some very interesting entries on Quora and Reddit about this. And what I noticed, and I kid you not when I tell you this, all female narcissists I encountered in my life, and I mean literally all of them, every single one I remember, they were obsessed with cats and had at least one of them at home. They called themselves crazy cat ladies, and the people on the internet said it's because cats tend to have a somewhat narcissistic personality. I remember an old video that went viral in which they compared a dog to a cat. In the first clip, the dog shows the puppy how to walk up and down the stairs by doing so. But when the video cuts to the cat simply pushes the puppy down the staircase. And that basically sums it all up. I'm not saying that every cat owner is a narcissist, so please don't be upset if that applies to you. It requires a lot more red flags to make that determination. But due to my experience over the past 15 years, it has certainly become one of the many things that I look out for. As usual, exceptions prove the rule. And I found that very interesting. Based on my personal experience, I find the insidious, manipulative, and exploitative nature of the female narcissist much worse than what I've seen in male narcissists. Having been with a male malignant narcissist in a relationship before, I know exactly where this is going when I sense just the slightest sign of predatory behavior. They are actually not as good at hiding it. But I often wouldn't expect what other women are capable of doing, especially to one of their own. You just never know if one day you are their friend or foe, because they have so much going on in the background. And once you feel something is off, you can't have a seemingly harmless conversation with them without the fear of them scheming or gossiping behind your back, or use any of the information you trusted them with against you, which they will more likely do than men. That's why the chances of being excluded from a community out of a sudden are much higher with them, and you don't even know what you've done wrong. Male narcissists tend to be different that way. They usually mind their own business because they don't trust anybody and don't always need a whole entourage to achieve their personal goals. And that's all I have to say about the female narcissist. I know it was a lot to take in. So thank you very much for listening and have a great day.